Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I hope everyone is doing okay and ready for another Saturday. Can't believe we are on week 8. Time passes by, at least when it is good. So, thanks everyone, and hope you're enjoying, hope you are learning something new. So, we are on week 8, and I'll be talking about lots of stuff. We also have guests coming up, so I'll talk about various stuff which we are going to cover into week 8. And this is also exciting because from next week onward, we would be going into behavioral track, and we are again trying to line up lots of guests and let's hear from them. Let's learn from that so that everyone get benefited from it. So let me quickly show you the agenda what we are going to discuss, and let's start with that. We also have Prasad and Parna who would be joining into the next section. So let's start with the uh, what is week 8 is coming up in this particular track. So I'll start with fundamentals track that would be on Active Directory. Active Directory is a very important aspect. Now, knowingly, unknowingly, we always use Active Directory, right? I don't see there is an exception. I would rarely find an organization who is not at all using Active Directory in some shape or form. There is always something happening in Active Directory. So let's see how we will be learning about Active Directory today. Then I'll talk about well architected pillar, which is about security. So well architected is obviously a bigger topic, but I will cover the specific aspect of security in this particular place. So let's go ahead and talk about that. And afterward, we would have a guest who is Nishant, who would help us in understanding how a cloud support engineer operates on a day-to-day basis. So he would be joining us for all these information. So that's what week 8 is, and lots of interesting stuff coming up. Keep your questions coming. Parna is there, Prasad is there, so they would be happy to answer the questions you have. So please keep your questions coming. Do not hesitate in asking any question. And if you have any suggestions for behavioral track, please include that too, so that we could work on it. Now, I would also be making an announcement about a free course I have launched recently on Udemy. To some of you have reached out personally to ask for feedback, and others, if I was not able to reach out to you by after this session, I would be sharing the free code so that you could register for it and then learn from it all the security information which I put together into a 10-hour Udemy training. So you should be able to get a free voucher at the end of this session. So we'll talk about that now. When we talk about directory, first we need to understand why we need to have a directory service. What is the advantage of getting a directory service here? Why a directory service? So if you look around, there is always we require authentication and authorization. There are two things which we always have to worry about: authentication and authorization. Whenever we are talking about most of the stuff in life, let's talk about that. Where security is required, these two things will happen. Let's say I'm talking about taking out money from my ATM machine, or I'm trying to make some transaction through ATM. When I'm looking at these transactions, what is happening here, that first we have to authenticate that who we are, right? So that is in form of what you know, that is your PIN number. So you would know about that through your PIN number, and that is how machine would recognize that this is a right person who is making transaction. Now, when we talk about authentication, most of the time authentication may involve multiple phases or multiple component. So something what you know, that is one thing. Then second would be what you have, or let me put it like something you know, and then it is something you have, physical token, maybe a device which is used to authenticate you, like a USB key, or maybe a physical device. So something you have. And last is something you are, maybe a retina scan or fingerprint scan or a voice sample, whatever it is. So these three things are used mostly for authentication. Like in bank's example, when I'm entering a pin, that is basically an example of something you know, which you remember in your mind. So that's how authentication works. Once authenticated, once we verify that you are a valid user, next comes authorization. Authorization says what you can do. Basically, can you withdraw money? Maybe can you make a transaction? Can you transfer funds? And that's how authentication and authorization are very embedded into our day-to-day life. Another example to make things little clear, we may have gone through passport control of countries or maybe for different destination. There is also we provide our passport, that is authentication. It contains who I am, it contains my date of birth, it contains my photo, so they could relate to it. So that is what my authentication is. And then they may also look for visa, which is my authorization. And depending on my use case, I may have a work visa, I may have a transit visa, I may have a tourism visa. It purely depends. So again, passport is your authentication, whereas visa which you have on your passport is your authorization. So I hope this authentication and authorization is clear. Now, these two things happen so interconnectedly that we sometimes do not bifurcate with them, but we need to understand that these two are separate things. Maybe one service is doing the same thing, like here passport control is doing your passport verification as well as visa verification. Same can happen in computing also. And when we talk about computing related authentication and authorization, we most of the time refer to directory services. So now I am going to talk about directory services. Let's see what these directory services helps you in achieving. Now, when we talk about directory, this example purely comes from old directory, phone directories. I'm not sure uh, if anyone has actually seen these directory services. I have seen that. I have searched through them. So it is a book containing an alphabetical index of the names and addresses of person in a city, district, organization of a particular category of people. So it may have only a doctor's directory, it may have all car engineers directory, it may have all your psychiatrist directory. So it may be containing information about individual and their contact number. So this is the only thing which is mentioning is that in this directory service we would have name of the person and we would have the contact number associated. Maybe if they have expanded, there may be address of that person also. That's all. Right. So this one is just a directory. It is not storing, not giving you any authentication, but it is storing information. Same thing can be there into enterprises too. Let's understand why we need directory services in enterprises. What is the use case for it? Right? Why we need it? So directory service in a very plain basic sense is a database, right? Because it is containing data. It is the database for storing and maintaining information about users and resources. What type of data we keep in that? We keep data of users and we talk about resources. So these two are common things which we store inside it. When we talk about users, users is basically me, Ashish, Prasad, Parna. That is the user. Like if I'm talking about Amazon's directory or AWS directory, when we log into our desktop, we provide a username and password. That information goes into a directory service and then we are allowed to log in into our laptop. That's how authentication is actually working on that. So first we provide our username and password, and we may have to use some physical device also for login for security purpose. So this directory service contains the username. So let's say it contains name of me and it contains that okay, Ashish is a valid user. Now it may also contain record of my laptop itself. Laptop is a resource. Why? Because they don't want any laptop to be used or joining their AWS network. So what happens that my computer has also a record created into directory services, and whenever I am joining in, that verification is happening that hey, is it a valid user and is it using a valid laptop? So that's how it will be working. So user and resources, both things. When I say resources, there could be more expansions on that. Like what I said you right now is basically your computer records. Similarly, if you have servers, it could contain your servers record. Servers could be your web server, servers could be your email server, servers could be something else. So there can be lots of things which can be stored inside a directory service. Obviously you won't be storing people's information, but sorry, you would be storing people's information. Maybe if you want, you could also have their photos stored inside it, maybe date of birth, maybe their marriage anniversary or something. So that all information can be coming into a directory service. Right. So I hope this thing is clear. Directory services are often referred to as just directories, or we call it user store, or what we call is a identity store, that is a very common name, and LDAP directory, or and they store information such as username, password, user preference, information about devices, and many more. So that's how we are using directory services. We need a source which can verify that it is a valid user, it is a valid computer who is utilizing. Now, Microsoft realized that very early, and Microsoft came up with their own directory, which they refer as Microsoft Active Directory. So most of the time when we talk about directory service, the first thing which comes to our mind is Microsoft Active Directory. But there were solutions also before it and right now also which are compatible with Active Directory. But Active Directory in a way has become a de facto standard in most organization for storing user information. Right now, how it Active Directory, I think, believe came in around 2000 when Windows 2000 and all. That is where this Active Directory concept came into picture. Previously, there was a concept of primary domain controller and backup domain controller. If any of you are old as me, that time it was Windows NT 4.0, and that has got replaced with Windows 2000. And through that, all the component become Active Directory based workload. So Active Directory has become the newer standard for authentication in most organizations. So what is Microsoft Active Directory? It provides the method for storing directory data and making this data available to network user and administrator. Why we are storing information? We are storing information so that when somebody requests something, we should be able to deliver them the required information. That's what we are trying to do, and that exact same thing is happening in Active Directory. Now it could be that this is my username, and maybe a authentication app is checking whether I'm a valid user or not, right? Or maybe my HR wants to go ahead and get some information, or maybe my manager wants to go ahead and get my phone number to make a call. So all this data is being stored into Active Directory, and that's how it is being pulled. I'm not saying that we are using Active Directory for everything, but there is some component which is happening on that. Right. For example, it stores information about user accounts such as name, password, phone numbers, and so on. That is a very common thing. Now, when we talk about Active Directory, security is integrated in Active Directory, right? So we short form we call it just AD. So security is integrated with Active Directory through logon authentication and access control of objects into the directory, right? So as soon as you are performing login, that verification is happening behind the scene. Your computer is going to a domain and then verifying. So whenever I am logging in, as my computer or laptop belong to something called a domain is like a area on which this Active Directory has an influence. So as soon as somebody is trying to log in, this information goes into Active Directory, verification happens, and if it is valid, I am allowed to log in. So that is how it is integrated with your logon authentication. And afterward, let's say I'm trying to access, I logged into my laptop, and now I'm trying to access application number one. Application one may have its integration with Active Directory. So if I am coming and presenting a Active Directory valid token, probably I would get answer to the request I'm sending in. So that's how Active Directory allows you to log in as well as allows you to perform access control. And it is very integrated solution. Like you could integrate it with your AWS account, with other account, or with other services should not be a problem. So that's what is Active Directory, right? Now, when I talk about how we implement Active Directory, um, I have to say that how your directory services work. So one option for you is that you take us any standard Windows machine. Obviously, that Windows machine would require some operating system behind the scene. That could be a physical or it could be a virtual server also behind the scene. And once your Windows machine is ready, on that machine, you go ahead and set up a Active Directory. So on that, you can go ahead and set up a Active Directory, and this service becomes the de facto standard of all authentication and authorization requests coming in. And probably, as if it is a one server and if it fails, you would be deploying multiple of them. So that is what we call as another server. So these all servers are called domain controllers, and you could have multiple domain controller. So domain is still same one single entity, but that domain has multiple domain controller. So you may get authentication requests fulfilled from any of them, and these domain controller behind the scene would ensure that they keep data into sync so that we can verify from any of them, and still we are able to get verification done. So domain is a logical entity, and to maintain a domain, a server need to run some software, and that software is run on domain controller. You may have multiple domain controllers, should not be a problem. And most function in Active Directory are performed as multi-master function. I would say most, not all, but most functions are performed as multi-master. Means, let's say I am trying to add a user or delete a user. My request can be fulfilled by, let's say, domain controller number one, and I would get response, and domain controller one would ensure that this data gets replicated to domain controller two. So that internal mechanism would ensure that wherever I am making changes, they are being replicated to the remaining domain controller. Should not be a problem, right? Okay, so that is directory services. So we are focusing on directory services in AWS just to give you an idea, and keep your questions coming if there is something not clear. I would be happy to explain. So we are talking about AWS directory services. Now AWS want to facilitate how you use Active Directory. So there are three components which are similar to Active Directory. So we'll talk about them. AWS Managed Microsoft AD, AD Connector, and then Simple AD. These are the three solutions which comes into category of AWS directory services. Apart from that, a recent addition is something called Amazon Cloud Directory. I'll explain about that too. And as you think that directories are giving you authentication and authorization, a similar service exists which is called Amazon Cognito. And in Cognito, we have a component which is called user pool, and that user pool would allow you to get your directory services done. So these are the options in AWS. Obviously, you could go ahead and create uh, a component on top of it, should not be a problem. So you could go ahead and add your own authentication services if required, maybe third party like Okta, or maybe you want to use OpenID or any other option. So you should be able to utilize it. Right. Now, question from Jaideep, could you please help us how LDAP is different from Active Directory? Active Directory is Microsoft name, right? So when I say I have a category which is called operating system, so operating system is a type of software. Now, I have a Windows based operating system, I have Linux based operating system, I have Mac based operating system. They all are operating system. Similarly, LDAP is a base. LDAP is the base protocol on which all communication happen, lightweight directory access protocol. So when I have set up a directory, I want to talk to it, get information. Like if you have a web server, this web server would be responding on a specific language. Exactly. So web server, maybe I have hosted it using Tomcat. Maybe I have hosted it using HTTPD services. Maybe I have used Internet Information Service of Windows. They all are web server, and once they are ready, they will understand your GET request. They will understand your POST request. So web server is the component, in the way I am interacting with them is my HTTP protocol. Same way, LDAP is a protocol. When LDAP is implemented by Microsoft, they call it Active Directory. So Active Directory is Microsoft implementation of a LDAP based directory service. That's how I would differentiate between LDAP and Active Directory. So Active Directory is a product, whereas LDAP is a mechanism behind that product. Microsoft calls it AD. Maybe there is another company who would call it e-directory. Maybe another company will call it open LDAP or something, but LDAP behind the scene is a protocol. So I hope this thing is clear. Right. So let's keep moving forward. Let's talk about AWS specific directory services, how we could use these directory services. Better would be that I go into console and show you things from there. So I'm bringing up a management console, and I am looking for directory services. So these are directory services. So we go to directory services and we would have option to select a required directory service to get started, right? So if I'm here into console, I have option to select either to go for AWS managed Microsoft AD, simple AD, go for AD connector, Cognito, or cloud directory. These are the same thing which I have mentioned in my previous slide. So these are all the options available for me. Right now, my focus would be on that how we are trying to give me a minute. Okay, let's so we will be focusing on Microsoft solution in AWS, how we implement the solution and what is the way to get these things sorted. Okay, so what we have one solution which is called AWS Managed Microsoft AD. Right now, let's consider you want to set up an Active Directory in your environment. So, all right, you could do that. What you could do, you could take a EC2 instance. Obviously, AD would require a Windows-based operating system. So on that EC2 instance, you would install Windows-based operating system. And once this is ready, on top of it, you would enable the features of Active Directory, and that becomes your domain controller. So this is one EC2 machine. What if it fails? So what you would do then, probably you would go ahead and deploy a second set of EC2 instance, which would be the same type of thing. You would have EC2 in that. You would have another Windows operating system running on top of it, and then you would be running a AD on top of it too. And this becomes your domain controller 1 and domain controller 2. And if you want higher availability, you would be probably hosting it in AZA and hosting it in AZB, right? And you would take care of your DNS resolution and all the stuff. That's how it would be utilized. Now, once this is done, your work is initially complete, but then you have to take care of all the patches which Microsoft releases every Tuesday. We call it Patch Tuesdays. So on Patch Tuesdays, I have to go ahead and deploy these patches on my environment, right? So that patches I have to maintain. Obviously, then I have to perform backups of these things. If something goes wrong, then I may have to scale it. Maybe I have to add more domain controllers, or I need to have higher capacity. So what I'm doing here, I am deploying AD in a unmanaged format. I am managing it, or I would call it self-managed format, where I am ensuring that I provide sufficient capacity, I ensure availability, I ensure backup, I ensure patches. So that is what my approach could be. But in that case, I am spending so much time in unnecessary things. Why I want to spend so much time in unnecessary thing? So AWS says, hey, we can help you. We would set up all these things for you, and we would maintain it for you, so you do not have to maintain it. So instead of self-managed, the whole solution is provided by AWS to you, and that is what we call AWS managed Microsoft AD. Behind the scene, it is still Microsoft operating system, so you have license. Behind the scene, it is the still exact same Windows operating system which is running, and it is being maintained by AWS. So with AWS managed AD, you can easily enable your Active Directory aware workload and AWS resource to use managed actual Microsoft Active Directory in AWS cloud. Now there is an important aspect here. Here it says directory aware workload. What we mean by that? Now, if you have used Active Directory before, there are a lot of solutions who would require Active Directory. A very simple solution you may have seen about is Microsoft Exchange Server, which is a very common component used for your email. So Exchange Server is a component which requires Active Directory, and when you install Exchange Server, what it would do, it would go ahead and modify some settings into Active Directory. It will not work without Active Directory. So that is a directory aware workload. So that's how you may need to have a full Microsoft solution deployed, but in a AWS managed format rather than you maintaining it. So you would go ahead and utilize these things. Question from Mintu: AD authentication is possible in RDS instance or not? It depends which RDS instance you are using. Mintu, if you are using Microsoft SQL, it support Active Directory integration. But if you are using MariaDB type of stuff or Oracle, it may not support it. So RDS is giving you engine, and whether it support Active Directory authentication or not, it would depend on the engine you are utilizing. Maybe Microsoft SQL Server supports it, but maybe Oracle doesn't support it. So it will depend on the engine you are using into your RDS as a service. Right. So I hope this thing is clear. Let's go into console and see what questions are asked to me when I'm setting up a Active Directory in my environment. So I'm going ahead here and say, hey, I want to set up a Microsoft managed AWS managed Active Directory. So let's set up it. It says what you are looking. Yes, I'm looking for AWS managed Microsoft AD. What I have to define, I have to set up a operating system edition on that. So as you see here, it is a Microsoft AD. It will be set up on Windows Server 2019 as a base operating system. And then I say whether I need a standard edition or a enterprise edition. This has to do with the sizes. So standard is good for small to medium sized business, 1 GB of storage of Active Directory, optimized for 30,000 objects. And then if I go for enterprise, I would be able to store up to 500,000 objects. Obviously, the cost will be different. As you see, include two domain controller with USD 43.200 per month for each additional domain controller, and include two initially, but there would be more which you could add if the need be. So you could set up whatever you require. And this is a name you are setting up. This is not a DNS name like a public DNS. It is your own directory. So I may call it besaprogram.com, and now I could go ahead and set up other net bias name also. That is an old thing but still exists. You could use that, and I may set up a admin password to get started with, so that I would be able to protect my applications. And now next I would be selecting where this would be hosted. Behind the scene, it is still an EC2 machine, so it has to go into a VPC. So I could go ahead and say which VPC. Do I have any specific subnet preference? So maybe I want to deploy it into 1A, and then I would be deploying into 1B. See this, I have to select two subnets here, and probably for best practices you would set it them into different availability zone. And there is a concept called first site physical location. So I'm just going ahead with standard, and I say next. And once I'm happy, I would just say create done. So what happens now? My AWS would go spin up a server, set up two servers, get up Microsoft software on that, and then once it is ready, I would be getting a directory name, and that directory name I would be using to perform authentication. It would also set up DNS for name resolution and all. So that is what is happening behind the scene. As soon as I said I want to have a Microsoft AD managed by AWS, so AWS managed Microsoft AD, so that we could use. All right, I hope this thing is clear. Second question we have here is what is a AD connector? So in the same screen, I won't click is create, it take 10 to 15 minutes, and that would be too much for right now. What I could do instead of that, I could go ahead and say, okay, I want to set up a directory, but this time I am looking for a AD connector. Why we need a AD connector? Let's try to understand it. AD connector is a proxy for redirecting directory requests to your existing Active Directory without caching any information into the cloud. Let's see the scenario. Let's say this is your AWS environment, and here you have your on-prem environment too. Very possible that you have different environments running, and now you already have a domain configured here. Your AD is there, and that AD is maintained by your domain controller. Right now, all my machines which are here in my on-prem, they know how to reach out to domain controller, so they send requests for authentication and authorization, and domain controller verifies all the things. What about my application which are hosted in AWS? They do not know how to contact to Active Directory, and I don't want them all to send requests internally to everyone to this AD. That would be little complicated. So what we do in this type of cases, we set up something called an AD connector. AD connector is still a software running on an EC2 machine, and what happens now? It says, hey, AWS machines, I am your domain controller. Any request you have for authentication, send it to me. I won't cache it anything. I would still be talking to your domain controller, which is here. So it is creating a channel of communication. Be aware it is not caching anything. So if your main domain controller is down, AD connector won't work. What it is doing, it is just capturing all the required information in one place and then transferring it to your domain controller. And whatever request or response comes in, that will be forwarded back to you. So back and forth work is being done by this server, which is your proxy for any domain work I am doing. So AD connector is a proxy for redirecting directory requests to your existing Active Directory without caching any information into cloud. Now, I said it on-prem, it could be somewhere else, it doesn't matter. So it could be another cloud provider, it could be your on-prem server. As long as they speak Microsoft Active Directory as a protocol, I should be able to set up a AD connector for them. Shouldn't be an issue at all. So I hope this thing is clear. What is a Active Directory connector? It is just being a proxy who takes requests from your cloud and transfers it to Active Directory on-prem or other cloud and gets you verified. That's all it is doing. It is just a messenger which is going from cloud to on-prem. That is your Active Directory connector. Behind the scene, it is still EC2 instance, and I'll show you into the UI how we set it up. Okay, let's go back to the UI and we would be seeing how we set up a AD connector. So AD connector is a proxy for redirecting directory request without caching. AD connector comes in two sizes, small and large. Small AD connector designed for small organization to handle a low number of operations per second. Large, basically a bigger EC2 machine who can handle a moderate to high number of operations per second. So when I select it, I would be selecting a small for this much of money, and then we have large with this much of money, which is what we could select. So I say small. Now I have to say, okay, any detail required. Next thing I have to do is to again host it. It would be a EC2 machine again, behind the scene, and it would be maintained by AWS. All the patching and all, you do not log into those machines at all. You just use those machines for performing verification. Next thing here would be to connect it to your AD, right? Because it is a connector, so it has to go and plug into a Active Directory. So let's say my Active Directory was besaprogram.com. Let's call it .com, and then we say what is my DNS address. So this DNS is the DNS server of besaprogram.com domain name. I provide its information. Let's say I say 10 1 10 1 1, just give an example, and then I may have to use an account to authenticate, right? Because not everyone can get information from Active Directory. So let's say I say my AD connector account, and I have created this account in Active Directory, given it required permission, and now I have set up a password for it. So this account has to exist in your domain controller, then only your authentication request initially would work. Afterward, all your requests will be used through this connector. Once I'm happy, I would go ahead and say review, and now my Active Directory would be set up. This is my Active Directory connector which we are setting up. So I hope this thing is clear and you have a better understanding of when I would be using a Active Directory connector. Very specific use cases. If you are looking for a full blown Active Directory in cloud, go for AWS Managed Microsoft AD. You go for AD connector if you want to use existing Active Directory in your environment. Shouldn't be a problem. Right. I hope everyone is following along and getting answers. Next one here we have is a simple AD. Simple AD. If I could rename it, I won't call it AD at all because it confuses people. I would just call it a simple directory. It has nothing to do with AD. It is not Microsoft implementation at all. It has nothing to do with what Microsoft LDAP is. What we are utilizing here, that we are using a Samba server here. So it is basically a directory service which is done by Linux or maintained by Linux Samba Active Directory. So that's what we are trying to do when I am utilizing a service which is your active simple AD. So simple AD is not at all Microsoft workload. It is a Linux based implementation of Samba server. You could obviously set it up on your own, but if you use this, then you do not have to worry about its maintenance and other operation. So simple AD will be able to give you functionality of LDAP, basic functionality of AD, because see, whether I have implemented a Samba server or whether I have implemented any other solution, it is all still using LDAP behind the scenes. So LDAP is still the protocol. So if my application speaks LDAP, whether a Microsoft AD responds to it or maybe a Samba server responds to it, probably it won't make difference. But if you are using some active directory aware application, if your application says that I am an active directory aware application, which means I need Microsoft Active Directory, then this simple AD solution is not going to work for you because it is not behind the scene Active Directory. Right. So hope this thing is clear. What is a simple AD? And we will quickly sheet this into console so that you could understand what and how we would be using simple AD. So let's go into console, and here I would be now selecting a simple AD as a directory service. So here is my simple AD, and in that we have small, large, all options available. Again, this is a directory service, so I would select small and I would provide a DNS name, I would provide a domain name and administrator password and all. So it looks exact same like you are setting up a Microsoft AD, but it is a Samba 4 Active Directory compatible server, not actual Active Directory. Like if you are from if you are into car industries and all, or maybe sometime or into, you will get compatible part, maybe they are not actual parts of from the company or the genuine parts, but they are compatible and they work best. That's what is also possible. So we can use the same thing here if the need be. So as you see here, I would go ahead, set up small things, and then go ahead and next, and my setup would be ready for it. So that is the third type of directory service which I could use if I need to. That is my simple AD. So I hope this thing is clear. Now, which one to choose? Select AWS Directory Service for Microsoft if you need an actual Microsoft Active Directory in cloud. If there is something which you need, always need, we need that Microsoft compatibility or we need Microsoft related workload, that time I would be using Manage Microsoft AD. If I am just looking for a proxy, let's say use AD connector if you only need to allow your on-premise user to log into AWS application and services with their Active Directory credential. So that is possible. You can also use AD connector to join EC2 instances to your existing Active Directory domain. So right. So what can happen? Maybe all of my machines are here into AWS. I launch a EC2 machine. It wants to be part of a domain, and that domain is hosted from on-prem. No problem, it would still be able to get authenticated from there. So that is also possible. In these cases we would be using Active Directory connector. The last one, use simple AD if you need a low scale low cost directory with basic Active Directory compatibility that supports Samba 4, and you need LDAP compatibility for LDAP aware application, then simple AD can be a great choice. So these are the three options available for you. So I hope this thing is clear, that you got a better understanding of what options are available in Active Directory. Now AWS offers other directory services too, like Amazon Cloud Directory. So you should be able to learn about that from the course link I would be sharing after the break. And then there is Cognito also. Through Cognito also, you are able to perform similar operations like a directory, but Cognito is not using LDAP behind the scene. And similarly, Cloud Directory is not using LDAP, but they still provide directory related services of authentication and authorization if the need be. So I hope this thing is clear and you have a better understanding on how directory services actually work. So I would stop now. We'll take a 5 minute break, and once we return, then we would be discussing about um security well architected pillar. So we will be discussing that in 5 minutes. So enjoy your time. We'll speak to you in 5 minutes. Thank you. I'll put a timer here. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone is back. Okay, we will now move to security track. We are on week number 8, and probably you have got a better understanding so far on all the aspect of security as we see here. So we discussed about various services, and even a lot of people helped us. Perna also took 2 sessions, and then we had external people, Kuse and Carl, coming and talking about all these things. So hopefully you have got a better understanding. So I'll go into that. Ali says, so do we use AS connector? I hope you wanted to type AD connector on hybrid environment. Yes, exactly, Ali. You would use those on hybrid environment. So anytime you have anything beyond AWS and you still want to use AD, that time you would be using AD connector for that. So let's keep moving forward and talk about security well architected pillar. So I'll talk briefly on well architected first, and then we will be discussing about the options available in security pillar of well architected. So obviously whatever I'm designing should be secure, and I should follow some common best practices associated. So we'll discuss about that. Let's first talk about AWS well architected. So AWS well architected initially was not in the shape we see today. It was on a different method. So initially in 2012, we incorporated or inception of well architected happened. AWS was working with thousands and thousands of customers, and everyone wanted to implement things in best practice manner, and doing it individually was becoming problem. So then an idea came that why don't we create a framework which will be following common best practices which would apply to almost every solution you are building into cloud. So that time well architected was formed, and then it kept on progressing. 4 pillars were established, then operational excellence was added, lenses were added, and what we see today is the well architected framework. So framework helps me in identifying what common practices I should be incorporating in my application. There are 2 components here. One is a framework, which is a theoretical concept, and then to implement these theoretical concept we have something called well architected tool. It is available into your AWS console, where you could go ahead, answer question, and based on that it would perform review of your workload. It is not a technical review, it is not going to scan your workload, but it will ask you question, and based on those questions answer, you would be getting a rating for your workload, like what high priority things are, or what priority you have, what are the challenges you have to fix. So that is the main idea of well architected framework tool. So that is called well architected tool. Okay, now how this all came in. So there are 6 pillars at all into AWS well architected as of now. The 6 pillars are operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability. These are common standard. What we mean by common standard, that whatever you build, whether it is an internal application or external application, whether it is uh, what we should, whether it is internal, external, whether it's a finance application or HR application, doesn't matter. Everything would be remaining the same. Like nobody would ever come to you and say, hey Ashish, your application is best, but can you make it slow? Nobody wants it. Everyone wants performance from their application. Nobody would ever come to you and say, this is costing me less money, I have more money to spend, can you increase the cost? So there would be never like that. Obviously whatever we are building, however small, however big, however complex, however easy, we would always need to optimize the cost. So cost optimization is another thing we have to take into consideration. Same thing, security is nobody is able to nobody wants to compromise, right? So security is another factor. And same way, I may want to operate that application in an efficient manner. I may want to have it running reliably. I want it to run sustainably. So these are all the common standard expected from any application, regardless of the size, domain, or vertical it is operating in. What we will be focusing right now will be focusing on the security pillar of it, and we'll understand what are the various aspects associated with security. Now, security pillar gives you something called design principles. So whenever you are designing how you should design your solution, those are called my design principles, and we'll be focusing on some of the design principles as we move forward. I'll give you some examples so that you could relate how we would implement these design principles. So when I talk about security pillar, there are seven design principles they adhere to. It depends from different pillars that they may have four, five, or six. Security has seven design principles. These are vendor application agnostic principles. They do not apply only to serverless workload or only to EC2 based workload or only to container. It is a general information which you should be following up, right? Like whatever your profession is, we all expect you to be disciplined. We all expect you to be arriving on time. We all expect you to behave nicely to people, regardless of whatever is your position. Same thing applies here. So security pillar has design principle. So we will be discussing about these seven principle. I'll try to show you as much example as possible in the theoretical concept so you could relate these concept and start implementing it on that. This is not a implementation guide. This is a principle discussion. This helps you in understanding how you should be incorporating security, and security should be added at every phase. In old days, what used to happen, let's say you are building an application. When the application was ready, then you would go ahead and bolt security on top of it. Okay, I have now add security on top. That phenomenon has changed now altogether. Whatever you are building, it has to have security built in from the day one. So it is not bolted upon. It should be created from the very specific day your application is incorporated. So security has become a core element of whatever we are building. Let's go ahead and talk about these design principles. Sorry, let me click that again. Yeah, first one says implement a strong identity foundation. Identity is again authentication. Identity means that can I identify who did what? Like if you are into an organization, you will all get an employee ID. You will all get a username and password. That is your identification, right? Maybe your credit card is your identification. You have social security number. That is your identification. So identification is somebody by which you are getting identified. It could be a user, it could be a role, it could be something else, but we will be using creation of segregation of duties. Like if I am a developer, I should have access only to developer related workload. If I am a QA, I should have access only to QA related workload. So use the least privilege principle by creating segregation of duties using the proper roles and permission, defining the appropriate authorization, and that's how we would be incorporating a strong identity foundation. I don't want to make resources available without having any authentic identification on them. Whoever is doing whatever they are doing, they should have permission for it, and that should be giving them only what we call principle of least privilege. Whatever is basic requirement for them, that's only you should be giving them, right? It's like giving your a kid pocket money, right? So we do not want to like spoil them by giving them thousands of dollars as a pocket money. We just want to give them enough so that they could survive and then maintain their social status within their friends and all. So that's how we have to be very careful in not giving too less, not giving too much, because both are not good. So we need to ensure that we provide a least privilege principle here as we operate. And how we do that, there are a lot of solutions available or services available on that. We talked about some of them, like we talked about directory services right now. Before that, we have discussed about AWS organization, which will help you in maintaining multiple resources across multiple in account. Then we have Cognito. Cognito is again a service which helps you in creating users and getting them authenticated. So that is one common thing. IAM, which integrate with almost everything in AWS. So we have already discussed these things. And then single sign-on is also solution which you could use. Through single sign-on, you could have one portal created and your users can come to this portal. They could access AWS account from here, and they could access different application also if the need be. So that is what a single sign-on or IAM identity center would help them in achieving. So that's how we should be able to incorporate a strong identity foundation in my application. The next thing also, which is not directly related to a directory service but very useful, is called AWS RAM, Resource Access Manager. This is really interesting tool. Let's talk about how we could use Resource Access Manager in the environment. So I have want to talk about this because these all services have something to do with authentication and authorization. RAM is little different. So let me talk about RAM. What RAM allows you, it helps you securely share your resource across account, within organization, or OUs with roles and user for supported resource type. Let me give you an example why we need it. Let's say we have set up a VPC. In that VPC, we have set up, let's say, a public subnet, right? Now, this whole thing exists into account number one. So AWS account number one is here. Now, we have all together a purely different account, nothing to do with this account altogether. So I have another account, AWS account number two. What I want to launch a EC2 machine here, but I want to connect it to this public subnet. I have not set up organization. I have not set up something else. I just want to share some of the resources which I created. That is where your resource access manager can be coming handy. So let me quickly go into console and show it to you that what I could achieve through resource access manager. It is an unexplored feature, I would say. Not a lot of people use it, but this could be a really great way of ensuring that we are giving enough resources and enough permission to my user to perform their operation, and see this shared by me, which I have in my account and I shared with someone, shared with me, somebody shared their resources with me. I could go ahead and use that, right? So I could go ahead and add principals here with whom I want to share, and these are the resources which I want to share. So let me create a resource. Now, you can't have all resources on that. So let's say call it as a public subnet, what I want to share. Here is my resource types. What I want to add and allow. Not every resource of AWS is available, but I could share lots of things here like Aurora clusters. I could go ahead and set up something on core networking. I may share Glue catalog, IPAM, then maybe license configuration, outpost devices, private CS if I have created, S3 if I have created, all these are there if you see here. So if you see here, all these solutions are available, and let me see if I have on subnet. So I'm trying to create a share a subnet here. All right. So these are two subnet which are available right now. These are private subnet and this one is a public subnet. Let's say in my account 172.16. So I say, hey, I want to share this public subnet. So I selected a specific resource here. That is my EC2 colon subnet is my resource type. I could call it a name. Let's call it as a name and call it a public shared subnet. That's what I have given it as a name. And now I could say who is allowed to perform actions on this resources. So what I could see here, I could go ahead and get these common permissions set. So see this. What would be allowed on this particular resource? They would be able to assign IP addresses, associate IP addresses, create tag, create security group on this subnet and associate, delete flow log, delete tag. All these options which I am expecting on a subnet level, I am allowing, including launching an instance, stopping an instance. That is all I am allowing. If I want, I could have set any conditions too. And this is coming from a managed permission set which is there. So this is a template which is AWS RAM default permission set, and through that I am getting these common permissions associated. Next thing, I would select to whom I want to allow this permission. Is it an individual? Is it account or someone else? So see what I could do. I could select sharing with anyone, or I could say share only with your organization. So if you have AWS organization, your structure of organization would be displayed, and you could go ahead and say, hey, I want to share with only with the QA, OU. So all of the QA user would see this subnet when they are launching an instance, and they should be able to hook their instance on this subnet if the need be. And similarly, I could say, no, I don't want to have organization based setup. Maybe I have a third party who want to access my resource for something, or they want to launch a machine for demo purpose or something. So I could say I want to allow sharing with anyone. I have to just provide them their account ID and select the user or the role who would be given permission in their account, and that's all. We do not have any organization setup. We do not have any relationship created between them. But as they both have access to resource on AWS, they would be able to launch my application like this. So that is another approach what I could follow through resource access manager. So this can be really handy tool, and obviously you would be able to track everything. Like here, if you see, you would be able to see shared resources, who is using that. Here is a manage permission library, you could add your own, and that's all my resource access manager would be using. You may enable it for across organization if the need be, or disable it if the need be. So it is a easy way to share common resources across organization, across account, without going into a lot of implementation detail. That is my resource access manager. I hope this thing is clear, that you got a better idea on what we could achieve. So why we need it? We need to implement a strong foundation of identity. We want to track who is doing what in my account if I want a better security for my application. So that is the first design principle. Second design principle of security is enable traceability. This may sound similar, but identification is one thing. So identification just talks about who. But when I talk about traceability, I need to answer more question: who, when they did whatever, why, what they have done, from where they have logged in. All this information, if I need, then I have to enable traceability. Traceability, think of it like you have, if not sure if you know about this or not. So when these athletes run into these event, and if that is like a event like Olympic or something, what they have in their shoelaces, they would be added a small tracker. And this field where they are running is a electronic one, so that tracker record their timing and all the details associated, so that tracks their journey. Like you may have a GPS on your car and somebody's tracking you, so they would be able to know what all places you have been into. That is what we call traceability. So traceability is important. We need to ensure audit log by central log collection, ingestion, protection and enrichment of the log, and dot all the resources which are helping me here are listed here. Now it is mostly all the resources, but there could be few more resources which I might have forgot. But these all resources will help you in understanding traceability, like what is actually happening and from how or from where my information flow is getting started. So that's I will be getting through your traceability as a service, right? So what we are seeing here, that we have a security hub which will be explaining and getting data from various resources and will be putting that into one central place. Guard duty, which is a threat detection service. Let me light it down. So security hub, if I say, it is a centralization of all my security data. When I talk about guard duty, this is my threat detection service that will help me, and we covered these services into previous section. Parna talked about it. Then we have inspector, which is for vulnerability management, right? And then CloudWatch, which is purely for monitoring purpose, and it can be used for logging purposes also, so that is possible. Config is our compliance related setting, so all my compliance related information would be captured through config, and I would be getting all the data from that. CloudTrail, when we discuss, CloudTrail would be capturing all your API actions happening on your environment. And then we may have VPC flow log, which will capture your network traffic as it is going into your environment. So that will all be captured by these services, right? So I hope this thing is clear, that these services will help you to understand what is actually happening in your network and who is doing what in your environment. Now some services are optional, Some services are there by default, like CloudTrail by default capture data for 90 days. If you want to longer retain it longer, you could transfer it into an Amazon S3 bucket. Same way, VPC flow log can be enabled and there would be a S3 which you could use. Now, good part about VPC flow log that you may go ahead and say, hey, I want the flow log for the whole VPC if requirement. So it can be enabled on a VPC level, it can be enabled on a subnet level, or it can be enabled on a ENI level, Elastic Network Interface level. So you may have enabled it on any of the interfaces to get started. So that's how VPC flow log is there. Now, the good part is that all these services work with each other. So maybe you have taken your data from CloudTrail and pushed it into CloudWatch. And then in CloudWatch, you are able to create alerts and alarms to inform someone. Same way, we could take this VPC flow log, push it into CloudWatch if the need be. Then Guard Duty can publish its information into Security Hub. Inspector can go and push its data into Security Hub. Config can give its data there. CloudTrail would be used by config. So all these services have a lot of interconnection between them. So it gives you the overall picture, not an isolated picture of what is happening. So that is how we should be enabling traceability. Whatever is happening in environment, can you track it? Can you identify who did what, when, how, where? That is all needed for that, right? So I hope this thing is clear. All right. Web security is in progress. Is WEF well architected framework covered? I'm not sure what the question is. Okay, I'm covering, yeah, I'm covering only the security pillar, not the whole well architected framework as of now. Right. Moving forward. Apply security at all layers. This is again very important aspect. If you look at a vip, like if you are a prime minister or president of a country, then you will not be just protected by yourself, or you would be having a guard. Like if I talk about US president, there is a special services who is protecting them, and then beyond that there would be more personnel protecting them, then there would be another outer layer. So security is always implemented into layers. Onion is the best example of the layering approach. So all of that is put together into different layer, and security is not relied only on one, right? So same way, when you are implementing a solution, what you may have that, okay, let me draw that. So let's say I have my application here. Now, before somebody comes into my application, what I could do, I may have implemented here something called Web Application Firewall. So WAF and Shield, they may be incorporated here. Right. Even before that, I may have Route 53. In that also, I may have incorporated security features. So Route 53 sends request to my user gets IP, then they send request to WAF and Shield. So I could come here. Now here I may go ahead and add more protection. So maybe I could go ahead and then say, okay, I would be having a load balancer. So first thing I would be having a public subnet, and on that public subnet, I would have a load balancer, and that load balancer will be protecting my application, which is into a private subnet, right? So that is one option. In private subnet, again, I would have a network ACL associated. In my VPC, I would have my route table associated. In application instance, I would have my security group. And nobody stopping you from having your own local firewall running on these machines. That can also be there if the need be. So as you could see, there are multiple layers of security which I could implement. Let me go ahead and show it to you. And here, let's see this one. So we have security at different layers coming up here. My request comes over internet. First, I get resolved to an IP address via DNS service. There is a security. Then I am being redirected, let's say, to CloudFront. CloudFront has its security feature. You could implement it. That is integrated with WAF, Web Application Firewall. After you have allowed, so this is your Web ACL created here. After that allows or deny, maybe your request will come into your VPC. In VPC, we have set up a load balancer. So then my front end is not directly exposed. I'm using a load balancer. I may have created a subnet which is only for egress, and I have only kept net there. I may have created a private subnet. In that private, subnet, I have net enabled, and now I'm using my instance has a security group. To protect it, I have put it into auto scaling group. And then what we have here, that we have lambda endpoints all put together so that we can talk to various services, and then security group and maybe databases are being accessed on VPC endpoint. And in all these places, we have not forgot to enable your network ACL security group and route table based configuration. So these all are part of it. That's how we should be able to implement a secure solution for your application, right? So security is always implemented at various layers, right? Why we do that? So that if a breach happens, let's say somebody was able to compromise one component, that won't mean that all of it get compromised. So if one component is compromised, only that get affected, but others may not be able to get affected on that. Question from Prashant: all the layered security approaches recommended won't have an impact on the processing of the request, as it need to evaluate all those security rules. Prashant, I agree. It is always a balancing act. It is always a balancing act. Now, we most services what we do here or implement here, they process data at the speed of wire. This is what is a common term which you will find being preferred, speed of wire, right? So yes, there is an impact, but then again, do you want, now if you want to go from place A to place B, you could drive your car at 150 miles per hour. Obviously you will reach faster, but again you are at high risk of having a collision, right? So it depends. Maybe you would not compromise security for speed. That is my take as an enterprise person. I would not be compromising anything, right? So I know that, let's say we are going through airport, always we have to wait in security queues for my electronic gate for visa verification or for a visa officer, but that is important aspect. I can't say, hey, for the sake of faster response, let me not check it. We can't, even if there is a huge crowd on the aircraft, they would not be compromising on the security standard. So security is something which should not be compromised for speed, at least say to say that, right? So it depends. Again, your decision. You design your application, you decide, I do not want to get bothered down by it, I would probably would be utilizing a better approach, right? So you decide on you, right? Okay, good. Right, let's keep moving forward. So that is another aspect of applying security at all layers. Then comes automation. Obviously, I don't want to wake up at the middle of night just to put an IP address into a deny list. That is a very complicated thing. I don't want that. So what I want to ensure automation for most of the things. So automate security best practices. So whatever you are trying to do, please try to automate it. I don't expect everything will be automated like 100%, but there is a fair chance in cloud that 80 to 90% of your work can be automated. And maybe if you imagine the scenario, then you should be able to go ahead and perform automation on that. So automation is a key function of whatever you do in cloud, because we are talking about scale here, right? We are not talking about one or two server hiding behind your desk and that is where you perform scanning and antiviruses. We are talking about thousands of servers being deployed at the moment and then removed and then added back again. So what we need to automate as much as we can. So best way to deploy an agile and secure environment is to leverage automation. Implement security as a code. What if my code itself is secure? And transform your paper security policies into real coded security control. So whatever you expect when you have a breach happening, what I want to ensure that I'm able to fix that breach. So maybe there is a procedure, right? So when, like if you talk about your houses, then maybe you have a fire alarm system, right? What we did through fire alarm, think of it. If in initial days when fire alarm was not there, somebody has to identify there is a fire, maybe by looking at the smoke, maybe by the temperature difference, and then we were relying on individual to sense it. Now there is a fire alarm running 24 by 7, and even when it is maybe just making a loud noise in your environment, or if it is a corporate building, probably there would be a water sprinkler also operated based on that. So if it detects a fire and it reaches a threshold, probably it would start spraying water so that that fire would be suppressed. So what we did here, we just automated response to fire. Same response can be automated in cloud too. So as you create infrastructure as code and insert security control to achieve automated security, you can scale your environment while maintaining the same level of protection. So simple example could be, let's say I have processed AMIs and I have golden AMI created. I could automate that as soon as a new patch is released by Microsoft or Linux, I get that into a AMI, go ahead through the inspector scan on that. If inspector identifies something, we get it fixed automatically, and afterwards only that golden AMI is created. And we have created in my infrastructure as a code that they, every time that only this golden AMI has to be used, somebody deploying anything beyond it, it has to be blocked. So that's how I would be automating as much as I can from security, just from deployment perspective. Also from operations perspective, we could automate. Let's see an example here. So here we have used step function, and this is example available on AWS website. I'll include the link. So if we are getting an IP address which is creating nuances in our environment, what we want to block it. Obviously I don't want to manually do that. So what can be happening, guard duty can detect those type of behavior. Guard duty has its check, and it would be able to identify the addresses which are creating problem or which are being seen into wrong, like black domains and all. So we would be able to get that through guard duty. Guard duty would send its finding, let's say, to security hub, right? It is again automated. Guard duty, you have to just enable it, that's all, and it will take care of all this detection. This information is now in security hub. Security hub may put a priority on that and say, hey, it is high priority information, and that can trigger a event into event bridge. So as soon as a high priority detection happens, that event triggers a event bridge, and through event bridge I could say now I want to run a step function. And in the step function, we have multiple Lambda function or databases or whatever required inside it, we could include it. Now, a common mistake people think about step function, that it can only work with Lambda. Answer is it can work with almost every service in AWS. So don't limit to think that it is only for Lambda. It can be used for various services too. Here we are giving example of Lambda. So as soon as we detected that event, and what guard duty will do, it will also identify the IP address which is creating problem, and that metadata is passed by event bridge also to my step function. So what my step functions can do here, it can trigger a lambda, and that lambda goes and insert that information of IP into a database. Maybe we verify through that lambda if that record already exists, this IP was also seen before into any attack. Probably there is a higher chance that this is a wrong IP which is coming into my environment. So we could record it. Right now, as soon as I do that, I could just do this and just stop, but I am taking it next level, and I say I want to block the traffic. So obviously, if you want to block a traffic, what you have to do, maybe you would update your network firewall. So we have updated our firewall policy. We have added that IP into a rule group, and through that, my firewall has start then blocking that IP address. The rule is added automatically for me, and if it successful, we notify of the success to the end user and say, hey, we detected an IP and we have created a rule to fix that. Or if there was a problem of not able to add that IP, we may notify about the failure also. So that is how we could automate as much response of security if the need be, and that would obviously help you in saving time and efforts, as well as it would be consistent. Like, let's say this is one IP. What if we have 1,000 IPs to block? Or what if we have 1,000 network firewalls to update? Manually doing it is not consistent, it is always error prone. So we need to ensure that we are able to fix these problems as we see. So that's how we should be automating as much as we can. This is one example. There can be various things which you can automate, shouldn't be a problem at all. Okay. Next topic here is protect data in transit and at rest. right? Again, very important aspect. Whatever we are storing, there may be a legal requirement to encrypt it, or maybe there is a security requirement which I should be fulfilling to ensure security for my application. So whatever we are doing, whether it is service to service communication, user to service communication, business to business, business to consumer communication, it all has to be protected by encryption. And there are a plethora of services available for that. We covered some services into the previous security track. So we may have used Amazon Messi to detect and identify anything suspicious in Amazon S3. Then we have KMS. We can use that KMS service for providing encryption. Then we have Cloud HSM. Through that also we could perform encryption or store our key in safe manner. And then Certificate Manager, which will be used for your transit security or data in transit. Whenever I need security, I would be able to create certificates using this certificate manager. And you can use server side encryption also. Some services have encryption built in. Some services may require encryption to be enabled. Like if I'm talking about DynamoDB, encryption is built in now. Newer S3 bucket now built in. But if I have a SNS topic, I may optionally select it. If I have a SQS queue, I may optionally select encryption on that. So ensure whatever is your data, protect the data in transit and rest. Right. So hopefully this thing is clear. Now, going forward, what else? What is the next thing in security pillar you should be aware about? This is important, very very important, and I have seen not lot of importance is given to it. Keep people away from data, right? It's not like people have bad intention, but we as a human are prone to errors. We are having our mood swings, we have our own good and bad days, and that becomes like a complicated thing. So humans may not be the best suitable person for this security, so let's try to keep people away from data. What we mean by that, we must create mechanism and tools to reduce and eliminate manual and human access to production data. Let me try to give you an example here. Let's say we have a database, right? In this database, we have information about all the customers. Now, I have a support user who is like helping customer with some problem. Now, customer calls the support user, and if I have given the support user access to the database directly, then it is very complicated, right? That is not at all a good practice. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done, but it is not something I should be planning for. That is not a best approach I am thinking here in this case. What I should do instead of that, what I should do, that probably I should create an application in front, and this application doesn't have to be very fancy application. If you don't want to create your own application, maybe you could use services in Amazon which is like Athena, or maybe you have something called QuickSight you could use, or you could create your even a different other application, other software if the need be. What I do now, I give access to this user only of this application, right? Now what happens here behind the scene, this application would be talking to my database, and through this application all my logs are also being collected. So whatever changes somebody is making, that is all happening here. And now I could give Athena only a read-only access, QuickSight read-only access, so nobody is able to modify it. Sometime by mistake, somebody would be making changes or maybe seeing more data than expected. But what we have now, we could set up settings here for work group or permission, and they could only access that much of data rather than giving access to database directly to someone. Right? So put an application in between who can track your request, who can track your security, and then give access to that application to user rather than adding someone directly into database. That is not at all a good thing to follow. So just be aware about that aspect too. Right. So you must create mechanism and tool to reduce or eliminate manual and human access. Now these two things are very important. Don't store, don't grant. Don't store what you do not need, right? Unnecessary data can be very very bad, and somebody may use it to exploit your application. So if you are storing credit card information, think yourself why you actually need that. Do you need the confirmation to be stored, or do you need the credit card number to be stored? Probably I am interested in confirmation. So don't store what you don't need. It could be anything. It could be credit card. It could be unnecessary IP addresses of users, or it could be their public location, or it could be their GPS coordinate. Don't store it if you do not need it. Unless there is a requirement legally or from compliance perspective, don't store unnecessary information. You are just creating problems for yourself. Don't grant unless they need permission. Don't grant them, and only grant what is actually required from that. So don't store, don't grant. That is a common concept. Whatever you are storing, if it is sensitive, see if you actually need that or you do not need that. So that's how you should be ensuring don't store, don't grant in your applications. Next is encrypt, mask, and tokenize. Obviously, encryption is important aspect, and we have various services listed here. So you may use Secret Manager, you may have used KMS, you may have used Cloud HSM to ensure that you are encrypting, masking, and tokenizing. Like we may use Secrets Manager, and that would ensure that I am not hard coding any credential, and those credential can be rotated safely. So Secrets Manager can be a really good service to use in these type of situations, right? Also, isolate tooling eliminate human access. That example I gave you, like we may have automated the services, and that automation would ensure that not unnecessarily people are accessing the applications which I have. So that is how I can isolate tools and auto eliminate human access as much as I can. Perform things as code, operationalize things as code, operations as code. Version control system, all your cloud formation can go into version control. You could track what changes were done, you could verify, you could run test cases in automated fashion on it. So that would be always available and be very helpful for you to keep people away from data. So that is another security principle in well architected pillar. The next one is prepare for security event. We all may have been into part of a fire drill in our buildings. Why we do fire drills? Fire drills are ensuring that we are now aware that what has to be done if there is a fire. We need to know where to gather, how to move forward, how, why not to panic, what would be the indicator, what are the safe things to do. So that's why we do fire drill, right? You would always hear fire drill happening in companies and department in your building. That same thing has to happen in your account too. So you need to ensure that if a security event happens, are your people ready to handle it? Are your tools able to capture it? And are your processes efficient enough? So when I talk about fire drill, so I need to ensure that the tools I have. So maybe I would check my public addressing system. Maybe I have my lights flashing. Are they working fine or not? So those are my tools. I would be able to sound the alarm, and then everyone should be able to follow it. So that is the tools I would be using. People are aware or not. So what if there is some issues with people? So in the sense, let's say somebody who is not able to hear things properly, do we have any visual information from him or her? Or if they cannot see properly, do we have audio information available for them, or maybe some other mechanism? So we need to ensure that my people are ready and they know what to do. So we need to train those people. Then processes, obviously, what has to be done? What would be my evacuation process? Who would be calling to whom? What should be the way to engage a fire brigade, or maybe to engage a fire department? So that process should be there. Or what would be the important thing you would be preparing for? I share a funny incident here. Like I've been working into different things, and I would share this example from my first day in AWS. So I joined AWS London office, and that was the day when they had a fire alarm. Now I'll give you an express idea on that. I worked in Bangalore for a long time, and when in Bangalore, when there was a fire drill, people would be coming out with their laptop bags, because that was the important aspect. What you protect is the important thing. So laptop bag is that what you would carry. The same drill happened into Middle East, Dubai, where I was working, and most of the people were carrying their passport because that was the most important thing for them, right? When the same drill happened in London, I have seen people come up with tea teacups. So this is when I realized that yes, I am in London, I'm in UK, in England, where people give more importance to their teacups rather than anything else. So that's how my first day started on AWS. But yeah, idea is you have to be prepared for security event. If something bad happens, how I should be able to respond. Is it tool or is it a process or people? All of them should be ready to handle the situation as we happen, and we need to ensure that we have tested it, right? Like we have fire alarm, have you tested it exactly or not? You have your fire suppression system, has it been ever tested or not? So testing is very important. We don't want to wake up in the middle of night and realize that the fire alarm didn't trigger, or that was complicated stuff in my environment. So we need to be aware about that thing. And then there is an incident manager available. So through incident manager in AWS, you should be able to manage your incident. So the incident manager will help you in these type of cases. So general definition, incident is a unusual or unexpected happening. IT definition is an issue with application or services, and system manager has a tool to help you in with this incident called incident manager. So probably that can be really useful if you are having any issues, and through that you should be able to fix these problems, right? So I'm not covering the details of incident manager, but there are examples available by which you should be able to get more information. So these are the examples available here. You could use it. Right. So I hope this thing is clear and you have a better understanding on security pillars. So I'll not go into the detail of incident manager, and hopefully you have got a better idea on how all these security principles would work together. So give me a minute, I'll bring that slide back so that you could see what we have discussed so far. So in the security pillar, we talked about implement a strong identity foundation, maintain traceability, apply security at all layers, automate best practices, protect data in transit, keep people away from data, and prepare for security event. These are the 7 design principle of security pillar. So I hope you have a better understanding now and get a really good idea of the security track. So we covered security as a track this time. Probably in the next sections we will cover other tracks also, but I hope everyone is following along and learning something new from these things, right? I hope everything is clear and everyone is following along. Let me bring that next section here. Give me a minute. I will be adding our guest here, and I will also add Prashad to the chat. Give me a minute. I'm just struggling with my controls here. Where is that PowerPoint? Yeah, here it is. So who we have now? We have Nishant, who would be helping us in understanding what it takes to be a cloud support engineer. So Nishant is a cloud support engineer and he has taken out some time to discuss about it. So let me bring Nishant to stage. Give me a minute. I'll start my cam. I will also add Nishant. Welcome, Nishant. Hope you're doing well. Can you
Hi
hear me well?
Ashish. Yeah, I can hear you well. Can you guys hear me well?
I'm getting some echo.
Okay.
Prasad, are you getting the echo also?
Is that the,
You are on mute, Prasad.
Oh yeah, I'm also getting a similar echo, Nishant, from your side.
Yeah.
okay?
So it's sounding like it's
Uh,
echoing a lot, like a robotic voice.
Yeah,
You are
like a
not
okay.
robot.
robotic
We could
voice.
obviously see you.
Let me. Is this better?
Do you want to disconnect and join back?
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Is this better now?
So maybe you could
So
disconnect and then
maybe
join
you
back.
could. Sure, I'll do that.
Okay. All right. So probably he would be able to join back soon, and hopefully everyone was able to understand the security track. It requires a lot of effort from our side, and we wait for feedback if you have any. So if you have any feedback, any suggestions, let us know in the BESA channel. You have LinkedIn group, use it for your benefit, and then share details there so that we could help you out in that. in any sessions related to security or other track. Nishant, you're back.
I hope this is better.
Much better.
Oh, yes, much
Much
Okay,
better.
better.
cool.
Finally,
Yeah,
yeah. So technology has its
fine.
own way of working. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't, and that's why we need all the time people handling technology like you. So support engineers are person when something is not working, I would be making that call to support engineer and expect them to finish that problem that very second I dial in, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. And we just employed the basic step of troubleshooting, which is just rebooting, like turning it off and turning it on.
Makes sense. So Nishant, if you could introduce yourself and then we'll go with the basic question answers.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm Nishant Buddhi. I'm a cloud support engineer too, working with AWS Premium Support and based out of Bangalore. So, I've been working with AWS for around 3.54 years now. And before that, I was an IT risk analyst for like 6 months or so. So I've almost spent 4 years in AWS. That's about the time I've spent in college. So that's it just makes me feel
Great.
that I'm getting older.
Makes sense.
And outside of work, I like to design and participate in quizzes and trying out different cuisines, playing sports like football and cricket, and also FIFA on Xbox.
All right.
Awesome.
Makes sense.
Awesome.
Great. How is the weather in Bangalore, Nishant? I miss that weather. I miss that.
Yeah, it's pretty pleasant. So that is the thing that makes everything bearable in Bangalore, I guess.
Yeah.
Like the traffic, the
Oh,
stress at work,
let's not talk
everything
about
else.
traffic. Yeah,
So everything just feels much better with the like cool and moderate weather that we have here.
makes sense. Makes sense. Great. So, tell us a little bit about how you ended up into AWS first, and then we'll talk about your specific roles.
Okay. So right out of college, I was working with an auditing company with in the capacity of an IT risk analyst. Well, then I came to know about the role in of a cloud support associate. So I started as a cloud support associate in AWS. So I got to know about that role. So I applied for it, gave rounds of interviews, and I was finally selected. So that's how I. So that was like pretty much right out of college. So there wasn't
Hmm.
a long journey that I have as a professional. So I'm relatively fresh as compared to all the other stalwarts that have appeared in this streaming series in the past few weeks.
Oh,
No,
then
cool.
we always need a fresh perspective, isn't it?
Exactly. Always need
Yeah.
that. But like when you said you applied, like, and you got through interview, like what kind of skills are required to get into a cloud support associate role? Like if anyone wants to uh,
Yeah.
get to the journey, what would they should be studying?
Okay, so in my role to become a cloud support engineer or an associate, you should have good problem solving and troubleshooting skills. So these are slightly different. So problem solving involves like defining the problem statement and going about it to solve it systematically, whereas troubleshooting is identifying specific spots and like applying fixes and all those things. So I as a person, I've been always involved with like troubleshooting my own computer, my own laptops while I was in college, like going through different kinds of documentation of Windows, terminals, and all those things. So more than coding and all, it is an out and out IT job. So you need to have troubleshooting skills. You need to have curiosity. So you need to like be able to dive deep into situations. Like if you have a support case, so you need to be able to see through to the end of the problem, not just like leave it in the middle kind of thing. And if you are talking about technical skills, you should have good operating system skills, like virtualization skills, like know what virtualization concepts are, because those will be very handy in any kind of cloud configuration or cloud provider, cloud services troubleshooting. And also networking skills, because that is the core of any configuration.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And
And also,
so,
yeah, just before I
go
forget,
ahead.
we need to have good communication skills as well, because after all you do,
Yeah,
all the troubleshooting and all the investigation, if you're not able to convey that to the customer, and sometimes customers can be really agitated or really worried, so you need to alleviate that stress first, like not first, along with your troubleshooting. So you should have good communication skills as well.
makes sense, makes
Makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
And do you work in shifts?
So AWS support, like premium support, it works in a 24/7, 365 model. So uh, I work as like in from 8 to 5 or 7 to 4. So that those are the only shifts that I have, because we have sites which take over after we hand over our responsibilities.
Follow the
So
sun kind of approach.
yeah, exactly. So follow the sun model. So we do not have a separate shift as such. We just have our basic shift, which is
Hmm.
either 7 to 4 or 8 to 5. So yeah, that's it. So
Makes
other
sense.
different sites follow different shifts. So
Yeah,
depending on which site you are, so you will follow a different kind of shift.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you become a support associate or an engineer, like what exactly are you supporting? A specific service or a specific set of customers? How is the whole organization structured?
Okay. So what happens is that we have premium support, which is paid support plans, and customers make use of that to raise support cases. So support cases can be about anything. They can be about high escalation, high severity escalation. It can be something that they're stuck with in a configuration, or just to know on about how to implement a particular functionality. So uh, then a customer will reach out to us. It can span multiple services as well. So a cloud support engineer will support a set of services rather than just a single service. So they'll be supporting related services. So for example, they'll be supporting something like Lambda and API gateway. Like if a person is working on Lambda,
Yeah,
they will have uh, some knowledge at least on other serverless services as well, so
Yeah.
that if there's a problem or there's a configuration issue, they can uh, make use of knowledge of other services that might be involved in that particular problem set.
makes sense.
Yeah,
And
and the
go ahead.
customer can reach out to us through an email, chat, or a call, like depending on their convenience and what their support plan allows. So there are times when usually high severity issues they come in as calls and chats. So yeah.
And how a severity is defined for you? Obviously, you define it, or is the customer defining a severity?
So customer defines the severity. So when you raise a support case, you get an option to raise to select the particular severity that you
Hmm.
feel is correct to it. So if it's suppose it's just about how to implement a situation, it will be a low severity. Or if it's blocking your project, you can like the customer can put it at moderate. But suppose they have a security issue, or a particular functionality, or suppose an SQS queue has gone down for them, so which affects their infrastructure and their model pretty much. So then they will choose a higher severity, or like a production down severity. Yeah. So it's the customer
So
who
customer who
chooses it,
selects it.
and we action on it accordingly.
Makes sense. I'll also add Parna so that she could also ask question.
Mhm.
And yeah, while she is joining, I want to ask like how you prepare for a specific service, because obviously you need to go in more depth than traditional ones. So how
Yeah.
you prepare for services like these?
So the way we prepare is we have training sessions initially. As soon as we join, or as soon as we are assigned a service, we have training sessions, we have labs, we have multiple video sessions. And after we are comfortable with that service, and after we have a particular knowledge, a particular set of knowledge about that service, then we start taking cases on that. And as you start taking support cases, you gain more and more expertise onto that. And slowly, as you gain expertise, there are SME programs as well.
Hmm.
So when you gain a certain level of expertise, we have internal evaluations as well, and which can get you like help you get certified as an SME of a particular service. Yeah.
Makes sense. Hi, Parna.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hey,
Hey,
Prana.
hi. Hi, Ashish. Hi, Prasad. Hi, Nishant. Very warm welcome to Besa. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
in.
It's a
And we had
pleasure.
a great session with Ashish. I'm sure he's exhausted. So,
I have to drink some water, so I'll be off camera for a while. So you
sure,
continue the conversation.
sure.
Yeah, he should deserve the break, man. Like I don't know
Definitely.
Yeah,
how
definitely.
can he be a machine, right? Like he goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people
Like
I
literally
was
think he's got 48 hours in a day. He's doing so many things.
yeah, I was waiting backstage, and I was just looking at him like go so efficiently and explaining every doubt, going taking questions and everything. So that was, and he does this week in week out along with his job. So that is like, simply
yeah,
remarkable.
yeah, yeah. He's Superman. But yeah, coming back to the questions, Nishant, the most uh, like common question, or like the most version that we would like to hear is that what does a day in life look like for you?
Yeah, that is the
Yeah.
quintessential question of this session, I guess.
Yes.
Do you get up with like a pong ringing that time
No,
to
no, no.
work?
That's what our shift starts at a particular time. So we are usually awake before that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That is a basic requirement and expectation from us that we are awake and alive and kicking before we start working. So a typical day starts like we log in and we have a status call kind of thing, a stand up in the morning where
Okay.
we discuss any issues that are concerning if there is a particular issue that needs to be taken care of or to be aware of. All those things are discussed in the morning. And then a typical day goes about all the support engineers basically tackling support cases. So there, as soon as we are done with our stand up and all, then we have support cases waiting for us always, almost always. Like apart from like times when it's a global holiday kind of thing, when the workload is relatively low.
Christmas
But
Day.
yeah, Christmas and New Year's are usually much lighter on workload as long as workload is
Yeah.
concerned. So apart from that, we usually have support cases waiting for us. So we just take the support cases, we work on them. So uh, for certain cases, we have to replicate the problem set on our environment as well. So that takes a bit of time. So it depends on the kind of support case that you get. So it's not something that we are able to choose. So we are routed a support case, and depending on the complexity or severity or the problem set, we have to replicate it. We have to look for like look into our own head and experience to get the answers.
A lot of
And
critical thinking, I'm guessing. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
have to
definitely. So a lot that is a part and parcel of that. Like I mentioned, problem solving and troubleshooting skills go hand in hand every day. Like that is the core of every support engineer.
So I'm curious
So
if your shift
mhm,
changes and you've not really, completed your task,
mhm,
or the case that was given to you. So what
mhm.
happens? Do you just hand it over to somebody else, or do you have to extend your hours? How does it
No,
work?
no, extend. It depends. Like usually, if you take a support case in the morning, like if you are a fresh joiner, so suppose if you're a cloud support associate, like when we join, we are cloud support associates. So then it takes us a longer time to
Of
complete a
course, yeah.
particular case, and we usually have mentors with us. If it's taking a lot of time to complete a support case or to resolve that issue, then we take the help of our mentors or seniors that are there in the team. And as you gain experience and expertise, you become more proficient with case solving. So it usually does not spill over into the shift time. But just in case if it does, then there's another side always ready, like to take a handover from us. So there's, yeah,
Okay.
so there's always someone working on it. So your support case or something will not go like unattended or something like that.
But it's usually a individual contributor, or you would have a teamwork, unless you have a mentor. Do you usually work alone or as a team? How does it?
So, yeah, so it is possible that I have received a support case which requires expertise of multiple engineers, like multiple
Hmm.
services. And suppose we need the expertise of SMEs in a different service.
Right, right.
So then we reach out to them, and that's how we work. Otherwise, if it's pertaining to your own service, then usually it's an individual effort.
Got.
But your that's what I said, it depends on a support case. It can be anything. It can be a highly complex issue with multiple services involved, AWS services involved, or it can be a pretty simple or straightforward case about a basic guidance or something. So that is an individual effort, and a complex case will require help from your
Multiple
colleagues,
minds,
and
yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, multiple minds. That is true.
So
And it also depends on the severity. So if it's high escalation, then we involve other teams as
Hmm.
well. So we have to work with other teams apart from AWS, like just premium support. In AWS, there are multiple teams. There can be backend teams. There can be like we've had technical account managers. We have had
Right.
solutions architects. So a support engineer will work with all of those people when
Okay.
the need arises. So we are kind of a binding force or a common joint in the
Glue.
entire workflow. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, a lot of time happens. Like now, I'm a solutions architect. So a lot of times, if the customers reach us out to us for specific things,
Yeah.
then we do route them to the support engineers. Just raise this ticket, let them get also
Yeah.
looped in, and we all will get into like call and try and
Exactly.
resolve it. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
it's
whenever
quite
we are on a
collaborative.
call with a yeah, so whenever we are on a call with a customer as well, then sometimes even the TAM joins in.
Yeah,
Sometimes even the solutions architect joins in to discuss and give more context about the problem. Sometimes the
Right.
yeah,
customer is not able to give the entire context that the solutions architect might
Exactly. Yeah.
be able
That
to
might
provide.
help you resolve things faster,
Yeah,
right?
much
Yeah.
faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what, when there is business support and enterprise support, these are different kinds of plans.
Hmm.
Business support plan and enterprise support plan, they have chats and calls enabled. So chats and calls usually lead to faster resolution than email, because all the to and fro communication happens on that, and we get to the resolution much faster.
Get it.
now like early in the career, like when people
Mhm.
generally start their career, there is a choice about going towards SDE versus support roles.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
how do we compare those SDE versus support roles? When should be choosing one or the other?
Okay. I'll give the context of, like, I'll give my personal context here.
It's yeah,
Since college, I have been a person who was not very inclined towards coding. Rather than I was always a facilitator kind of a person rather than inventor, or being an inventor on my own. So I personally love this kind of role more than a coding job. But again, if you are in two minds or something, then you can all like if you become an SDE, your I'd say that your career path becomes a bit more narrower. But as if you are a cloud support, you join as a cloud support associate, you become a cloud support engineer after consequent years and promotions and all. So once you become a cloud support engineer, then the career path like widens quite a lot. If you still have that caliber and interest for coding, you can like move internally to an SDE role. If you want to become a TAM, then we have mechanisms that internally that will help you, uh, that will train you and help you become an associate TAM and then a TAM. You can become a solutions architect. You
So a lot
can
of
become,
options open up, I
yeah,
guess, because you're working with
exactly,
so many things. So I
yeah,
totally
exactly,
identify with what you said, because even I haven't been the innovator, but I like that problem fixing part of it. That gives
yeah,
a bigger kick when you are able to resolve it. So
exactly.
I agree. okay. So
Yeah.
I do
So, and
understand.
you can like Parna is a trainer, so we've had even CSEs like cloud support engineers move into the training teams as well. So,
Okay.
once you become a cloud support engineer, the like career path is just it's just your
Limitless.
choice, and
Okay.
yeah, it's
Okay.
quite limitless in AWS. Yeah.
That's
Other
awesome.
thing that I've interacted with cloud support engineers a lot.
Okay.
What I like about their role is the level of customer interaction they do early in the career.
Yeah.
Mm.
True.
A lot of opportunities, and that is something that is really useful when you grow up in your career, interacting with customers, irrespective of which role you are. Anyone who is watching this, ensure that you try and meet the customers. Like there will be always people in between who will arise customer, but if you can get into those calls, you can get into that room, it will always help you boost your career. So that's a
Yeah.
great tip, Nishant.
You are actually on ground, right? You understand the
Yeah.
problems
Exactly.
they are facing. So
Exactly.
they
So
connect with
that
you
is what
more.
yeah, yeah, that is what helps us move into different roles as well. Because if you are an SDE, then you are just related, like you have technical knowledge, you are working on technical problems only. But when you are as a cloud support engineer, I work on the technical aspect as well. I work with engineers, like other teams as well. I work with customers as well. So there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of interaction, and all those things. So which help you in becoming a different, like choosing a different path as well. And
Yeah,
in premium support also there's more than just cloud support engineer. There's like higher roles as well, like who work on support related process, improving support related processes within support engineering, so that the job of the future support engineers becomes much easier, and they are able to provide support to customers in a more efficient and amiable way. Yeah.
yeah.
So did you do any certifications before you applied for this role?
Before I applied, I did not. But solutions architect associate certification will be helpful. Like it is handy to have in this when you're applying for this, but it is not
Okay.
mandatory. But
Okay.
once you're in the role, like all our seniors and all managers, they will like strongly recommend that you get that certification, but because that gives you a broader sense of services in general,
Of
which
course.
you can choose your, like you are assigned services later, but
Okay.
that gives you a broader understanding of AWS services. So
What about
that is
depth of
certification.
knowledge? So, apart from certification, did you have to have a lot of knowledge about Linux? Did you have to have a lot of knowledge about virtualization? What about ISE tools? I think you must be doing that a lot, right? Operations level
Yeah, yeah,
troubleshoot. So, were you expected to know all that and bring that to the
yeah.
table, or just the urge for you to learn was gauged? What was your
No, no, no.
interview
So,
experience like?
yeah, when we interviewed, we were asked a lot of questions on operating system and
Okay.
like operating system basics. They'll start from that. They'll get into more practical knowledge as the interview progresses. So, it can be about Linux commands, like you mentioned. It can be about shell commands, how to
Okay.
troubleshoot a particular thing using just shell commands or something. And a good knowledge of networking skills and networking concepts is, like,
Essential.
I won't
Okay.
say mandatory, but yeah, highly essential. Yeah, because that networking concepts are used in every service, like every AWS service. Whenever we are using whenever we are resolving or working on a support case, networking concepts are used in almost every service related query.
Yeah.
So networking concepts and virtualization concepts and operating system concepts, these things you should be very clear about before, like while applying or while working as a cloud support engineer.
Great.
Good. Related question, like no, the knowledge that we need to have. Related question is asked by like one of the these are Devesh. Is there any
Mhm.
specific experience that is required to get into these kinds of role?
So for a cloud support associate, we do not expect to have any experience per se, because usually we hire people from fresh out of colleges directly for cloud support associate roles. But for cloud support engineer roles, we expect them to have a few years of experience, 2 3 years of experience, which is helpful. I am a cloud
Awesome.
support engineer too, so they, like, as the designation
Yeah.
increases, you are expected to have more and more experience when you're being hired laterally.
Cool. I know we are
So how
almost
do
on
you?
time, but
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead,
yeah.
Aparna.
Do we have a question from the audience? We can pick that up
Yeah,
rather than
yeah, we have few questions on the audience,
yeah.
but go ahead and you ask your question, and then I'll put up the questions.
So, because you need to know so many services and you know the pace of innovation at AWS, how do you keep yourself updated, right? You could be handling any case, like you're saying, you don't know
Yeah,
what
yeah.
the next day. So, how do you keep yourself updated?
So we are not support, like each engineer is not supporting all the services. We support a set of services. So
Okay.
we are
You're thorough
very
with what,
thorough with
yeah.
that and updated with that, because uh,
Okay.
we get to know about various kind of updates or something. Like if you are involved with a set of services, you get notifications regarding that as well. Like internally, we get notifications that there's a new
Okay.
feature, you can try this out. There might be questions regarding this.
Hmm.
So being updated is pretty easy, because that is our job. Basically, that is our job. That before the customer knows, we need to know that
You
as well.
need to know it before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they are coming to us expecting that they'll get answers. So we need to, that is our job as well, because there are during our day as a support engineer, there is a particular period of time where we are expected to just work on this, apart on just work on support cases. And after that period, we have time to work on different projects, work on documentation. So as a cloud support engineer, we just don't just work on support cases. We like write papers, we write blogs, we write
Okay.
internal facing blogs, we write tutorials and videos for public
So,
facing
writing
issues
skills
as
is
well.
also essential
Yeah,
for this
that
role,
is something
definitely.
that we pick up as
Okay.
we are put through the system.
Grill.
So that
Right.
that writing a scientific or technical writing skill is not a prerequisite, but that will definitely
You
help you
pick
in
it
this
on
role.
the way on the
Yeah, yeah.
role. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And
Uh, hmm.
we also mentor the new joiners, like the freshmen that are joining our
I'm
organization.
sure that's essential, right? Because people who
Yeah,
join
that
in will
is.
be really, in awe, like what's going to happen, what's going to come in my
Yeah, yeah.
plate, right?
Because
That is very essential.
I remember my first day, I was uh, quite overawed by the entire experience. And I was like overwhelmed. Sorry, my bad. I was
Yeah,
overwhelmed by it. Like, and I had good mentors with me. They held, like, quite figuratively held my hand and got me through the entire training process. They taught me how to handle particular situations and what to do, what not to do, all those things. So
great.
eventually, we strive to become good mentors. I hope my mentees will agree that I am a good mentor.
I'm sure they will. So,
Sure.
Prasad, there
Yeah,
was a question about, I think, which other certifications, networking related, would you recommend,
Yes, there are in fact
doing?
multiple questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
I somehow there was a question and then I highlighted and somehow it went away. I don't know what's happening with the tool. But what I'll do is I'll start from the top and I'll keep flashing all the questions. I know
yeah.
Nishant, we are over time, but we'll take 5 or 10 minutes to answer the questions and
No
then
worries,
we'll
no
wrap up.
worries at
Hope
all.
that's all right.
No
Yeah.
worries at all. Yeah, yeah, no worries at all. It's just a Saturday.
Cool. So let me start with this.
Okay, when you investigate a production issue, what kind of access
Access
do
do
you
you obtain?
obtain? Yeah, so there is only a certain level of access that we get. We do not get the entire access to the customer's infrastructure. We do not have visibility into their logs. We do not have visibility into a lot of things. So we have their configuration. Basically, we know about their configuration, and from there we investigate it. So, and we ask for logs from the customer, because the logs might contain a lot of sensitive information, and
Right.
privacy at AWS is day zero. Like,
Hmm.
that cannot be stressed enough. So we have visibility into the configuration of the customer.
Yeah.
Like, that is the best way I can uh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes
describe
that's
that.
where I
sense.
Yeah.
think the solution architects and TAMs can help you, right? If you don't
Yeah,
get the
exactly.
entire picture, how do you resolve?
Yeah, so we ask the customer, they if they want to share their like the logs and other information, we ask them to
Okay.
share that without any privileged information or
Exactly.
sensitive
Sensitive data.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, we have NDA signed, right? So even if
Yeah.
it's fine. Somewhat related, I would say.
Hmm.
If someone not part of AWS, let's say if someone is learning and they want to replicate customer environments for troubleshooting, how would like in general, how would they
So
do
if
that?
it's troubleshooting, we have a lot of labs and blogs for that. Like if you go to AWS website, there's a repost and there's a repost website. Yeah, so repost is a very effective tool to ask questions, get solutions for that. We have tutorials in documentations. We have labs as well on GitHub. We have entire cloud formation stacks available on GitHub Labs, which on one click will help you replicate an entire configuration, and then you can troubleshoot according to that. So there are a lot of resources. Yeah, there are a lot of
Yeah,
resources that you can make use of. So
right.
like if you can connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to share that further. Yeah.
Awesome. I think I found the question again. So here it is.
Okay. Yeah, for networking concepts, is the CCNA still useful and indeed relevant? Yeah, definitely. We learned a lot of CCNA concepts in college, like when I had learned in college, which were very, because they are the basics of networking, right? So whatever kind of networking infrastructure you use, there'll be a basic concept, like there'll be subnets, there'll be gateways, there'll be virtual private gateways. So all those things, basics come from CCNA as well. But a CCNA certification, that depth of knowledge is not mandatory. It will definitely be very helpful as a support engineer, when especially if you're supporting services of networking such as a VPC or something like that, or a web access firewall, something like that.
Yeah.
So CCNA certification is not mandatory, but it will be more than useful than for your job.
Yeah. The next question, you have partially answered this, but there are a couple of more folks
Mhm.
who are, like asking about this.
Mhm.
That
Okay,
when you join
after
AWS as
you,
a support engineer, how long it
yeah,
takes to
yeah.
prepare for, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a proper training period. We are, it's not like you join AWS 1 week of training and you're fed to the wolves. No, it's not like that. So we get a good amount of period. So even the managers and your mentors, they will keep like they'll stay updated with your progress. If you are facing difficulty somewhere, they will ensure that you are uh, not facing a difficulty after a particular time by helping you out, guiding you in that particular service or particular concept. And you, there is a full period of 2 to 3 months which keeps changing. So I cannot say for sure that, because if you join and you might later reach out to me that you said that there'll be 3 months, but it's only 2 months or something. But you'll get ample time. That is adjective that I will use, and it's not an exaggeration, because you will get ample time to prepare. You'll get ample time to get used to their job, and then only you'll be supporting the customer. Because if you think on the organization perspective as well, we do not want to have underprepared or overwhelmed
Right.
engineers.
We don't want to increase
Exactly.
their grievances beyond what they are.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I have three more questions if the time permits.
Yeah, yeah.
So first is this.
Is there a specific tool AWS has designed for customers to lock tickets? How are cases based on services and assigned? Okay, so if you go to your support console, on the, if there's a search bar, right, in not the support console, sorry, AWS
AWS
console. Yeah,
management console.
yeah,
Yeah.
just log into your AWS account. The first page you see, there'll be a search bar on the top. You just type support there, and you'll get an option for support, AWS support. So if you have purchased a plan, you'll get through like depending on your plan, you'll get developer, depending on your plan, say developer plan or business plan or an enterprise plan. You'll be able to raise an email, chat, or a call to premium support directly. and how a support. So you, while you put in your problem, you select the service with which you have an issue. So
Yeah.
that is how a ticket is transferred to a particular team. So the services that I support, the customer will have selected a particular service while raising that support case, and that's how it gets routed to us.
Awesome. Thanks. One question is this,
Mhm.
like advice that you would give to the people who are currently in the engineering college and who aspire to become, like AWS support roles.
Advice would be like I do not want to sound very preachy or anything, but yeah, have a lot, like if you have interest first of all in networking and OS a lot on the concepts, and rather than just coding, just if you have interest in configuring networks, configuring like troubleshooting your operating system while setting it up and all, if you have those interests, like like I would advise the particular student to just go deep into those concepts. If you still love it, then this is the role for you. I'll say work on projects related to that, and work on events in college as well, because that will help you in collaborating and communicating, which is also a very
Hmm,
essential part of our job. So
absolutely right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
So, what do you
this
think
sound.
you knew before? You should have learned before. Was there some things you thought after coming on? I wish I had spent time doing that. Can you tell?
No, I am mentioning all this because I did all this in college. That's why I
Okay,
was part of various teams and all that, and
right.
I that helped me go through my interview much more easily, like
You're
smoothly.
confident,
And
I guess.
yeah, I
Hmm.
was confident about it, and I was strong in my networking and OS skills. So I was
Awesome.
Great.
like among the good graders in college, in my class at least. Yeah,
So I guess
so I
that's
had
the
it.
thing. So you have to be well prepared in those
Yeah,
domains before actually attempting.
yeah, exactly.
Awesome, Nishant.
Final
Do you have any
question,
questions?
not on
Yeah.
like yes, specific job, but
Oh,
a curious.
yeah. So these are Funko Pops. Like my brother introduced them to me, and I've been collecting them since I got my first paycheck. So uh, these pertain to different kinds, like all popular culture, say movies, animated movies, sports persons, rock bands, everything. So
So he has a
whichever.
hobby other than solving
Yeah,
problems.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I have my Xbox also just behind my like behind my back. So as soon as I'm done
No, we're
with my
just kidding.
work,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
So
right. It's wonderful chatting with you, Nishant. Prasad, do you have any questions?
No, I
Ashish?
think we have covered all the questions. Ashish, yeah.
Yeah, we covered all of them. So yeah, means I do not have any additional question, but yeah, it was a really insightful discussion. And
I think
now
we have just
I
one more question in the end. I just
yeah, go ahead.
took a look. A
Check
Oh
that.
yeah,
non-tech
there's a
question.
question that has come up.
Yeah, yeah. Can someone who is currently in a managerial role, let's say a 10, consider moving to cloud support engineering? Managerial role, so we have cloud, like in our organization we have managers as well. So like I mentioned earlier, when you become a cloud support engineer, I had mentioned that you can become a TAM or technical account manager. You can even become an operations manager within the org as well. So basically you'll become my boss if you become an operational manager. So if you have experience in managerial roles, say like you mentioned, like managing a technical team and all, so you can if there is an opening for that, then you can definitely apply for an operations manager role, who will be managing all the engineers, support engineers. Any advice for people coming from non-IT degree without IT background? Okay, so if a person is not in IT, I would be very surprised as to why would they want to apply to a very
Highly
IT specific
technical
role.
role, no?
Yeah, more than technical, it's just about what IT is like. It is about enabling technology. So if you do not have IT interests, then it is difficult. But if you are coming from a non-IT background and have gained inculcated an interest for IT, then I would suggest you uh, go through the Solutions Architect Associate certification, which will give you a more broader understanding of AWS services, and like read up about networking and operation system concepts. So if those still interest you and you're still feeling like, yeah, this is the thing that I should do, because we have people who have come in from mechanical engineering also, but they have extremely strong IT skills because
Yeah.
they
You need to
realize
have
it
that
later.
love. Yeah, because
Yeah,
then only
love
you can
for, yeah,
continue
exactly.
learning and upskilling, right?
Now,
Yeah.
having
Okay.
said that, I've seen many people from a complete different background, like people who have been like, nursing or teachers or
Mm.
even
Hmm.
athletes. They have moved
Hmm.
into IT roles. And the common pattern that I have seen is that they have used certifications like CompTIA and other
Okay.
like industry IT specific certifications to
Hmm.
learn all the basic concepts,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then they move higher with CCNA and other stuff. So Emma, if you're interested in something like that, let's feel free to connect with me, like on LinkedIn. I'll be able to like point to you few resources that other people have told that they have used. And I've seen a clear path from people who probably would have not have studied IT during their college times. They have had experience for a few years in some completely different domain and have been able to move into IT. Not probably as a support engineers, but there are other IT roles which are more aligned for those kinds of roles.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So yeah, means I want to wrap it up in interest of time for everyone. It's
Yeah.
11:15.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you, Nishant, so much. It was really insightful discussion, and you were very candid in sharing things. And probably the
Yeah,
advice you
I'm.
have given would be helping people a lot. Maybe you would have some question coming up on LinkedIn. So thanks for
Yeah,
that too.
definitely. I guess.
And we hope to learn from you more. Maybe when we have more time, we would be engaging a little bit in more detail about how you go ahead of troubleshooting something, like from a high level, what approach you follow, but maybe for the next session. So thanks everyone. Thanks for attending. And I hope everyone has learned something new. Thanks Prasad and Purna for taking over. Yeah, my voice was struggling a little bit because I had a very intense class yesterday. But yeah, everything is well at the end. And I
Just
wanted to
Can
yesterday,
share.
you've
relate
been
to that.
speaking since a year, since an hour already before I joined. So
Yeah,
no
I
one's
means.
gonna complain about your voice.
Thank you. Thanks. That's so nice of you. So I wanted to share one link here in the chat for people who have joined us on YouTube on and any other platform. So this link will give you access to my course. I'm giving it to free for some of the people. Probably some of you already have access to it. But if you want to learn on security, I'm making this course available. It would be able to give you a lot of information on security. And if you have any feedback afterward, give us, and I would be happy for it to accommodate it. And BESA participant are obviously near and dear to my heart. So anything I create, I prefer to give it first to BESA participant. And thanks everyone. And we are starting our uh, behavioral track next week. So please give us some suggestion. We have existing exciting line of guests here, and if you have any other topic you want us to cover, we including a whiteboarding topic because that is something which a solution architect is doing on a very regular basis. And if there are any other topics which you think can help you in becoming a better solution architect or pursue something, we would be happy to include those too. Right? Anything else, Prasad, Parna, you want to add?
Only thing I would add is that like anyone who is going through Ashish like security course, it's an awesome course. Feel please do leave a review on Udemy. It'll really help us also, and yeah, keep like spreading the love for Besa as you do on the LinkedIn. It'll help us to reach more people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you all in the behavioral sessions. I'm sure it's going to be insightful as well. See you. Thank you,
Have a good
Nishant.
one. Thank you. Bye.
It was a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.